Environment and Natural Resources Policy. And quorum is present. And Representative Benson, have you reviewed the minutes of March 12th?
I have, Mr. Chair, and they look correct to me. I'd like to move them.
Okay, Representative Benson moves the minutes of March 12th, Environment and Natural Resources Policy Committee. Any questions on the minutes? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails. Representative Hansen, I'm going to move the House file. Got to get the right page. 1222 to be laid over for further consideration. Representative Hansen, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House File 1222 is a repealer. It's a fairly simple bill repealing a provision that was passed during the special session where the legislature got involved in prescribing conditions relating to the Antler point restriction. So I am repealing that section, which then goes and gives the Department of Natural Resources the authority to set the seasons as they see fit. I believe in your packet you have a letter from the DNR that includes the most recent results from public input. And I believe there are a few testifiers for the bill.
All right, thank you very much. Questions of the members of the bill at the very outset here? There being none, Robert, Todd, Marty, and Brian, you can all come down and get ready to testify on if you've signed up. You can come up to the front, and we'll have you up there one at a time. And when you get up, you'll state your first and last name and who you represent, which apparently you're saying you're just a public citizen. Welcome to the committee. Thank you. Go ahead, sit down, introduce yourself, and go ahead with your testimony. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Todd Votz. I live in Preston, Minnesota, and I guess I don't really represent any particular group other than myself, but I did want to come and testify in support of the Antler point restrictions. I have been involved, I guess, kind of on the outskirts of it to some degree over the last 3 to 5 years in the development and so forth that the DNR has been working on the Antler point restriction regulations, and I've really seen the benefits of APR over the last 3 years in which they've been enacted. And again, you know, so I've been hunting for most of my life, and I'm really, again, not here to talk even specifically for myself, but really for the next generation of hunters, particularly my kids. My kids spend a lot of time with me when I'm out in the field. I have a 6 and 8 year old children, and when we've been out in the field the last couple of years, we've really seen some positive effects through the APRs. You know, when I was a little kid, you know, if we saw any buck, any size buck, that was a pretty monumental thing, and even at that time, you know, any buck that you saw, that was one that was a harvestable buck. Today's world is quite a bit different than it was back then. You know, we have a lot of deer out in the field, but through the mentality that was kind of developed in the 70s and 80s where, you know, you shoot the first buck that you saw, that was really skewing the deer population, and it you know, harvested a lot of the young deer. And when you look at the populations in states around us, we're really kind of missing out on the potential that the state of Minnesota could have. So through the APRs, you know, where we protected the 1.5-year-old bucks, and then once we got into year 2 in 2011, year 3 in 2012, we really started to see a lot more, and not what we would call the trophy bucks, which a lot of people try to signify this as, but a lot of more mature bucks in the population. And for me and my kids, that was just really exciting to be in the field, be able to see a large array of age structure within bucks. We had a lot of bucks in up close that were not legal to shoot. It really taught my kids a lot about assessing the target that they're looking at, counting points on the deer, seeing if it had, you know, 3 points on one side, 4 points on one side. You know, we went through most of the season this last year, passed up several bucks, and then we finally had a legal buck come by right at the end. And to me, that was just a really great thing that we were able to do that. And could we have done that without the APRs? Yes, we could, but we would not have been able to have seen the nice age structure that we did out in the field today, because in the past, if we would have let it go, it probably would have went to the neighbor's farm and been harvested at that point. So with the APRs, it really helps to protect those yearling bucks, and at least in my eyes, really helps the younger hunters out there get more excited about the deer that we have out in the field and really be able to enjoy that out there. There's a lot of different arguments for and against the APR, but again, as mentioned, I think you received the summary from the DNR here in the last couple of days, and the hunting public is in favor of keeping APRs, and there's a pretty resounding majority. So I think, to keep the progressive deer management moving forward, we need to, follow what the hunting public is desiring in this part of the state. So, I hope that we can follow through with what the public is looking for, and move to keep the APRs enacted in southeast Minnesota.
Any questions of Mr. Vaught from the committee? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marty Stubstead from Rochester, Minnesota. I have been in the retail sporting good business for 36 years, a member of the Bluffland Whitetail Association for 13 years, and also a board of director with the Bluffland for 6 years. What we need to understand here today is that over 10 years of research with tremendous amount of hours given in implementing an alternative management program for whitetail deer in southeastern Minnesota. A few years ago, Bluffland Whitetails hosted the first of its kind Whitetail Roundtable seminar in Rochester. Those that attended were the whitetail biologists from Pennsylvania, Missouri, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. Hunting associations throughout the state also attended. This meeting was an exceptional opportunity for interested parties to hear and discuss whitetail management programs. This roundtable was our first hand in listening to Missouri's program using the APR system. Our Minnesota program was modeled from that, and we have mirrored the same results over the last 3 years. In numerous board meetings, it was discussed on how to implement and approach a new whitetail management program. It was a unanimous decision to work with Lou Cornicelli from the Minnesota DNR. It is their job, with their professional background and expertise, a program in whitetail management can be successfully developed. The DNR's public survey showed 64% of the southeastern Minnesota deer hunters vastly favored the antler point restrictions that has been in effect for the last 3 hunting seasons. The deer hunters are also overwhelmingly in favor of no cross-tagging of antlered bucks. Being that the vast majority of southeastern Minnesota hunters favor this new management program, it shouldn't be of any question to let big game management professionals of our Minnesota DNR be in control and continue forward. The opposition's biggest concerns is not being able to identify their target before pulling the trigger. Sadly, this argument defies one of the top commandments in hunter safety: identify your target before you shoot. It's only common sense the days of blasting away are over. Most all animals we hunt today have to be identified in some manner before we shoot. Turkeys, tom or hens, got a beard, pheasants, ducks, and even with the fish we catch today. Antler point restrictions identification is also in many western states for elk, mule deer, and sheep. Our DNR enforcement has already made public statements that there are not finding piles of dead deer left to lay because of the restrictions. We have great deer hunters in southeastern Minnesota that are patiently waiting for the sure target and ethical shot. Parents have also made many comments that they feel it is more safe for the family during the firearm season. Hunters have ceased in taking that running or low-light shot opportunity. The hunter enthusiasm has skyrocketed in southeastern Minnesota, especially last year after the 3 years of the APR, because of now seeing an older class of white-tailed deer in the woods. To keep hunter retention is difficult today with all the busy schedules we keep. Even though the buck harvest had declined as it was planned the first year, 2.5 and year older bucks are being taken instead of that small young buck. The southeastern Minnesota hunters are encouraged and excited because they now know that passing up that year-old buck will give them something to be more proud of and extra meat on the table. I sincerely ask you to give the authority back to the Minnesota DNR and let them move forward with what the vast majority of the hunters want in southeastern Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the testifiers? Being none, thank you very much. Next person, please. Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Brian Todd. I reside in St. Charles, Minnesota, which would be right outside and partially in the 344 Whitewater management area. I've been hunting for about 41 years, and with my dad, who was 74 years old. He happened to take the biggest buck of his career this fall, and it's directly because of the APR situation. The deer was a 3.5-year-old deer, and he was able to survive through the years to get to that point. I hunted with my daughter, who was 10. It was her first season this year. We put in 10 days out in the field. She was able to see a couple smaller bucks during the 3B season, which is pretty much was unheard of a few years ago because they were all harvested in the 3A. She did take a nice doe at the end, and I was very proud of her, and I think we got her hooked for the deer hunting. I have a son who this year found his first deer antler, which was also directly because of the APR rule. It was a little 3-point shed that was found on state ground, which again, this deer would not have been able to have a chance to make it that far, being the public pressure is on the state ground so much that the deer herd really gets hit hard. Everything I hear in zone 344 is positive for the APRs. We're seeing deer. We hunt in a big group during the muzzleloader season. We're seeing just about 3-to-1 ratio for does versus bucks during the muzzleloader season that have survived. We got neighbors at this time of the year yet comparing trail cam pictures of bucks that they're seeing yet that have made it through, and you know everybody's kind of working together more than I've ever seen before. So in my opinion, this needs to continue, and I hope we do the right thing and give it back to control of DNR. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Questions of the testifier? Being none? We're going to take a vote on this bill likely in about 6 or 7 minutes. So if you can, thank you, sir. We're going to lay the bill over. I'm sorry. So we've heard a lot about the herds and things like that. So if you have something additional to add, we appreciate it if you'd add it.
My name is Robert Marg. I represent Winona County Farm Bureau, plus hunters in, or farmers mostly, but most of them that hunt in Wabasha County and Houston County. I've had numerous calls, and unlike your other testifiers, I am completely opposed to this. We are actually offering an alternative, which would be that the DNR must do this on a voluntary basis. Use education instead of forcing it down the throats of everybody. The other thing is I represented Southeast Minnesota for Farm Bureau at the 2005 deer meetings they had in Rochester. At that meeting, after going through, the hunters all wanted more deer. The thing is, the DNR themselves stated that southern Winona County and most of Houston County and a part of Fillmore County were running at 45 deer per square mile. They stated 12 to 15 is what it should be, 15 as a maximum, because they said if you have more than that, they damage the woods. They say nothing about what they do to our crops. Under this antler point restriction, I went to the first meeting they had in Winona, and before it I had called Lou Cornicelli, and he told me under it there were 3% more deer shot. He comes to the meeting, says there's 3% less deer shot. Well, then I tried to talk to him after the meeting. At 20 yards away, he was pointing his finger at me and telling me he's not talking to me, that I should talk to somebody local. So I talked to Don Ramsden for 2.5 hours at my kitchen table. When I brought up antler point restrictions, the first thing he said is that's Lou Cornicelli's game, and all it is catering to the trophy hunters. That was his comment. He also said about the deer numbers, and he said, well, we don't go by those counts anymore. We go by the tolerant level of the farmers. Well, the one area where I can find information on deer counts was the chronic wasting area, in which I worked the Farm Bureau booth at the State Fair. I had farmers from that area that came in and were complaining about how much deer damage. What did they get from the DNR? Oh, there's not that many deer in that area. Funny thing is, the next year it came up as the chronic wasting area. Then they gave a count. 6,500 deer in 100 square miles. That's 65 deer per square mile. There should have been 5,000 deer shot out of that area alone to bring it down to their maximum. Now, the DNR, again, had a deprivation meeting a year ago in Winona. At that meeting, Don Nelson stated that we underestimated the number of deer in the area. We should have given more license out. Well, they didn't. Now, this year, I've got farmers, and they're in an area where the DNR says you can only take one deer. I got Bruce Speltz with $25,000 damage to his crops. I got Keith Speltz with $15,000. Tom Tieber with $15,000. There's Leonard's, and I forget his first name. He said he has $10,000 to $15,000. Frank Kreidemacher at $10,000 to $15,000. I had about 15 names. That was from an area where they only allow you to shoot one deer. And they say we should get deprivation tags. I tried to get deprivation tags on my farm. I called the deprivation officer up, and he told me that he was getting 5 to 6 phone calls a day, and he could only get to 2 to 3 people a day. He asked me if I had extreme damage. I says, no. He says, well, I'll get to you later. He never showed up. I asked for 2 doe tags for about $1,200 damage. And he says, no, I can't do that. I wanted them for the hunting season so my hunters could shoot a couple extra does to bring the population down a little. 2 license. Keith Speltz, who had $15,000 damage, asked him 2 weeks before the hunting started if he could get 10 tags for either before or during. He said, no, I can't do that. You're too close to the hunting season now. Well, when we got to the meeting, the last meeting that they had in Winona now, then Lou Cornicelli there and this Clint, who was the deprivation officer, were talking. And Clint says, well, I can give tags out during the hunting season. I says, well, you wouldn't give them to me. He says, well, you didn't have me come up to your farm. I says, well, Keith Speltz had you come up, and you said there's a lot of deer damage, but you wouldn't give them to him. He turned around and walked away. At the meeting also, we had Lou Cornicelli, who I asked the question, what is the doe kill doing during this APR? He wouldn't answer the question. All he'd say is, well, we believe the whole deer population is going down. Don Nelson was standing there, and I watched him. As Lou Cornicelli was telling us that, his eyes went to the floor and his head went down, which tells me loud and clear that he knew Lou Cornicelli was lying. Now, the next question that was asked of him that he wouldn't answer was one question on the questionnaire.
Well, sir, I get the idea that you're against this, and you've given a lot of testimony. So if you could come to an end on this, I appreciate it. And we're not going to tolerate accusing people of something like lying.
Well, I mean,
that is
he come up to the. That's fine. I'm going on. He come up to a question that was on the questionnaire to landowners that stated, "Do you want to be paid for damages?" They asked, what about us getting paid for damages? He didn't say anything about it. He says, there's a question over there. Another person asked it. Oh, there's a question over there. He sent the guy away. He wouldn't even answer the question. Now, if farmers are supposed to take that much damage on a program like this that makes it harder to shoot deer, I've got friends here that we cannot focus on the points when they're moving in the woods. And as far as knowing their target, I know it's a deer. I mean, but to move through the brush, we don't have wide open spaces. We're on hillsides with a lot of brush. And I think it's time for this to be an optional program. If that many people want it, the farmers want it, they can put it in on their farms. The deer hunters want it, they can hunt that way. But we should have all the hunters we can here. And the DNR doesn't seem to care. There's got to be some balance here.
All right, thank you very much. Representative Cornish, you have a question?
No, comment, if I could.
Okay, go ahead with your comment.
The short comment to Mr. Chair. I agree with everything this testifier said except the part where he got into the little name-calling thing, but I don't like this APR at all. I hope this cancer stays where it's at. I'm not going to fight that if they want to keep it down there, but I just don't want it to spread to the rest of the state. We're suffering hunter recruitment right now with young people, and the last thing I want to do is make them go out there and be unsuccessful for their first and second year while they stare at horns. And I don't like the argument that says we know what we're shooting at if we have APR. If you don't know what you're shooting at, you shouldn't be in the woods. So I don't mind taking the extra time. It's the same thing as canvasback ducks flying by at 60 miles an hour, and you got about 3 seconds to identify them or not. So I just strongly against this. If they want to keep it in that area, I'm just worried about it spreading to the rest of the state. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much.
Can I have
Further
one more
testifiers?
comment?
No, thank you. Further testifiers, anyone else? Yes, sir, come down.
My name is Ted Wierzeniak. I'm with the Minnesota Whitetail Alliance, and I'll keep it short. I do have an education in wildlife biology, and I do want to say that what the previous gentleman was talking about, that is completely independent of APR. In fact, APR is something that you can actually use to reduce deer populations. So regardless of the deer numbers, that's something that can be managed separately, but APR generally reduces deer numbers. The other thing I'll say really quick, I do run a Facebook page when we're talking about youth recruitment and retention, and it's the Minnesota Whitetail Alliance, and if you look at the people who support us, over 50% of them are 24 years and younger. So if you're looking at hunter retention and hunter recruitment, this is the way to do it. I believe the youth are our biggest supporters. It's no doubt about it. So that's all.
Thank you very much. Questions of the testifier? Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wozniak, just one question. You said that APR actually increases the deer population.
Decreases.
That's what I said, increases. What is the science? Did I say? Decrease.
Go ahead, Representative Fabian.
Thank you.
It's on the tape.
Yeah, I know that. Okay. I apologize. What's the science behind that?
If you are having to pass on bucks, you're more likely to take a lot of people will shoot the first deer that comes out. And if they shoot a buck, in fact, there's a lot of people that will, if there's a doe and a 6-point buck out there, they're going to take the 6-point buck because it has horns. Well, if they're forced to take that doe, they're more likely to reduce the deer numbers.
Fabian, follow up. Any other further questions? Thank you. Anyone else like to testify for or against the bill? There being none, Representative Falk, you weren't getting up, were you, to testify for or against the bill? Apparently not. Okay, so Chair will renew his motion to lay the bill over for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Falk.
Mr. Chair, I've had a bill. I'm pushing getting under this.
You mean they're more important than us?
It's,
Representative Isaacson.
oh, thank you. Great.
Representative Isaacson moves House File 1091 for further consideration. Representative Isaacson, to your bill.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Did you move? I didn't catch it. I was sent up. Is it moved already?
The bill has been moved, and now we're ready to take up the 1091A1 amendment. Would you like to move that, Representative Isaacson?
Sure.
Okay, Representative Isaacson moves the 1091A1 amendment for consideration to get the bill in the shape the author would like it. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevailed to 1091 as amended. Representative Isaacson.
Thank you. This is the Aquatic Invasive Species Bill from the DNR. It's an agency bill. I'm going to have a testifier on that.
Welcome. State your name and who you represent, and go ahead with your testifying.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members, Representative Isaacson. I am Ann Pierce with the Department of Natural Resources. I am the Invasive Species Unit Supervisor. And I will present the 1091 bill. The first section, there is an addition of decontaminates in that section. And what this will do is add decontamination to the lake service provider training, allowing us to meet the demands that we're being faced with, and also to assure the public that people have been trained in decontaminates. Section 2 is the section requires that nets will be cleaned before being placed into. It is replacing when removed from. This allows nets to be cleaned more appropriately and more thoroughly at a proper location. Section 3, the phrase "unless specifically authorized under a license or permit issued by the Commissioner" is added to the transportation of aquatic macrophytes. This permitting authority is outlined under Section 8, and I'll address that in a second. It will allow us to take out 2 of the exemptions under that subdivision, exceptions 2 and 7, which will then be conditions will be covered in the permit. Section 4, the term zebra mussel will be removed and prohibited invasive species will be used in its stead. We will be repealing the definition of zebra mussel also, and using prohibited invasive species. Section 5, this section allows water taken from non-infested waters to be transported in tanker trucks and other commercial vehicles that are specifically designed to use in water hauling, with the requirement that the water is not discharged into another water body or within 100 feet of surface waters. And the conditions allow us to allow for an existing use that has very low risk. It also adds that vehicles used for firefighting and emergencies that threaten human health and safety would be exempted from the drain plug, allowing the drain plug to be in and water not released. Section 6, this is a technical clarification, and it basically adds individuals so that one water body that has multiple accesses can have an inspection at an individual access for that whole water body. Sections 7, 8, and 9 are additions of permitting authority by the Commissioner, and also allowing the Commissioner to add conditions to existing permits. This will allow us to reduce the need for multiple permits and to add conditions that address the activities in Section 2, 3, and 5. Section 10 is another technical clarification, and this basically makes the licensed peace officer cannot issue both a civil citation and a criminal citation, and this is similar to what already is allowed by our conservation officers. Section 11 and 12, in these 2 sections, we are adding the requirement for an AIS prevention program education course for persons who have either a criminal or civil citation, to provide them with further education and information. This is placed in 84D and authorized in 86E. And then finally, on Section 13, repealer, we are repealing the definition of zebra mussel because it is redundant. Zebra mussel is a prohibited invasive species. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Questions on House File 1091 as amended?
Mr. Chair?
Representative Hugo.
Question of Representative Isaacson. This is going to be effective when?
I believe upon signing, isn't it?
August 1st.
Does it have?
Effective date July 1, 2015.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Hugo.
Why so long?
That's the training.
That's just the training, or, okay, so the rest of it will go into effect?
No, that isn't just the training. That's both the training and, no, that, see, it's right here. Training. Is there another date?
Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chair, members, the two provisions that regarding the training would go into effect July 1, 2015. The rest of the bill, unless there's an appropriation added, would go into effect August 1 of this year.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions, Representative Fabian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Isaacson, on page 7, in section 11, subdivision 9, it says training for offenders. Tell me, what is the training course that they're going to be required to go through?
Mr. Chair, members, I am going to refer to our enforcement, Rodman Smith. So I'll let you sit.
Lieutenant Colonel Smith, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Lieutenant Colonel Rodman Smith, Assistant Director for Enforcement Department of Natural Resources. Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Representative Fabian, the training that a person would be taking under Section 11 and Section 12 is the training that has already been prescribed in law for the trailer certification. So if somebody was going to have a trailer, this was enacted last year in law, and that training hasn't been developed yet. It's an online training class that an individual is going to have to take in order to transport water-related equipment on a trailer. So that the short answer is the training hasn't been developed yet, but it'll be the same as that training.
Representative Fabian.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm a little uncomfortable voting, or I'm not sure what the plan is on this bill. I don't remember what you said. You're going to lay it over? Okay, thank you.
Well, could you put on the record what you're uncomfortable with?
Well, I'm just uncomfortable with the training course is not defined. We don't have a sample. We don't have things here. I just think that it's in the public's interest to know specifically what it would be.
Colonel Smith? Anything to add to that? Okay. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Isaacson, we had been visited by some resort folks, and they mentioned they were working with DNR. I was expecting in this bill an exemption for resorters for their fellow family members on the AIS work. Is that still work forthcoming, or where are we at on that?
Representative McNamara, are you referring to the NORNIS bill regarding, that bill is going to be an amendment that I'm going to put on the game and fish bill in government ops tonight.
Well, Mr. Chair, when this bill comes back, in case this ends up and your game and fish gets sideways, why don't we also get it on this at some point also?
Take that under advisement. Thank you, Representative McNamara.
Thank you.
It'll give us multiple attacks at it.
Thank you, Chair.
Further questions? Anyone in the audience like to testify for or against House File 1091 as amended? There being none, Representative Isaacson renews his motion to lay the bill over for further consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
As amended. And now we need Representative Falk. Representative Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The Chair will move House File 1185 to be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Environment and Natural Resources Agricultural Finance Committee. Representative Falk, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in speaking with Ms. Taylor earlier, I have a small oral amendment, if you would be so kind to offer that. Ms. Taylor, if you are ready, on
Ms.
line
Taylor?
1.10, strike the words sealed bid and insert, strike the words a sealed bid and insert an auction. And then on line 1.19, strike the words conducted through a sealed bid process. And the purpose of that is just to be more flexible with technology.
Okay, Ms. Taylor, can you repeat the amendment?
Sure. Mr. Chair, members, the amendment would read on line 1.10, delete a sealed bid and insert an auction. And then on line 1.19, delete conducted through a sealed bid process.
A discussion on the amendment. There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. To the bill as amended. Representative Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This deals with the taking of nuisance elk, and this is kind of a rare situation to my understanding, but it has occurred in the past. And one of the things we have is basically a cost for nuisance elk in the ag budget. There's a cost for damages as a result of elk. And one of the things that just looked at exploring the option of is if we're going to go and issue permits or licenses to go and take nuisance elk, we should actually try to get as much value for that as possible. And so this would allow the, or ask the commissioner to go and conduct those through a auction process and then award the bids, the licenses to the highest bids. And the reason why, I mean, I have no problem with the fact that we want to have a process that allows people to fairly have access during the normal hunting seasons, but for these extraordinary circumstances where we are taking nuisance elk, if there is the opportunity there to go and collect additional revenue, which relieves our pressure on other state resources, I think that's something we should explore. I'm not sure if the department wishes to speak to the bill. I said that I'd be willing to still work with them on this, but I think this is something we need to explore.
Thank you, Representative Falk. And I see the department is coming forward to speak on House File 1185 as amended. Welcome, and introduce yourself, and let's hear the comments from the department.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Paul Thielander. I'm the Wildlife Section Chief for DNR. And just want to comment from the department's perspective on this bill. Currently, we've got a program in place to deal with elk damage by having some various options, long-term and short-term options. If we have a depredation complaint, we've got available for long-term food plots strategically located to try to reduce damage to private lands, stored forage management. If there's depredation problems in the wintertime to stay stored forage or hay, we can protect that with fencing, work with landowners in that regard. And then some immediate options, landowner shooting permits to deal with depredation problems in summer croplands on the spot. We usually turn those permits around within a day of request. And then also we have in statute currently to use licensed hunters to take nuisance elk between August 15 and March 1. Some of the concerns we have with the bill as drafted is transferring the funding to the general fund, be it a version of revenue under our federal aid language. That's a big concern. So that would not be allowed by the Fish and Wildlife Service Wildlife Restoration Program. We'd jeopardize all of our federal aid, which amounts to about $15 million annually. Also, by issuing a license through an auction process would remove our longstanding practice of allowing equal opportunity to all people interested in license purchase. And then lastly, it would result in a longer response time for depredation complaints, and that would be met with resistance from landowners. We need to be responsive and timely in our response to depredation concerns. So I guess just in summary, I would say that we're concerned about jeopardizing federal aid projects. We're concerned about this would not minimize our interaction with landowners, but would tend to increase conflicts instead of reduce it. And then also it would not make license available to those folks, except those can afford to pay the bid-up prices. So, thank you.
So I take it from your testimony the department opposes the bill.
We are opposed to the bill.
Thank you. Questions for the testifier, Representative Falk? There being none, people in the audience would like to testify for or against the bill. Okay. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Falk and Deputy Commissioner Thielander, excuse me, your definition of nuisance elk.
Representative Falk.
I would defer to the department to, I mean, I don't have the statute book in front of me, but.
Mr.
Go ahead. Mr. Chair, Representative Fabian. Definition of nuisance elk would be those elk that are actively causing damage to croplands or stored forage.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And how do you determine that as an agency? When a complaint is registered?
Yeah, we get a complaint at our area office, and we go out and respond to the complaint, visit with the landowner, inspect the damage.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And generally speaking, how long does that process take?
Well, we normally respond to those the day of the complaint. If we get a call in the morning, we'll be out there that day to inspect and confer with the landowner.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Representative Falk, I've talked to him about this. My concern with the process here is that there's going to be a substantial waiting period before we actually deal with the nuisance elk, and we have a history of how some of them get dealt with, and I really don't want that to happen in the future. So, thank you.
Further questions of Representative Falk or the department? There does not appear to be anyone to testify for or against the bill one last time. There being none, Representative Falk renews his the chair renews his motion that House File 1185 be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Natural Resources and Agricultural Committee. I said that, as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Aye. Motion prevails.
Division.
Division has been called. Those for the bill, raise their hand. Those against? There being 8 yes and 7 no, the bill does prevail.
Good ears, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to lay out a little groundwork here on House File 906. We're going to have a delete all amendment from Representative Hansen when he gets up to the table. Representative Hansen, you want to come up? And we're going to have the DE3 amendment. We're first going to move the bill before us, House File 906, and the motion will be that Representative Hansen moves House File 906 to be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Government Operations Committee. And so then we are going to take up the DE3. So Representative Hansen makes that motion as well as the motion to move House File 906 DE3 amendment to get the bill into the shape that the author would like the bill. Any discussion on those items? There being none in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. So now, members, we're working off of the DE3 amendment, and for the audience, you will have this as a bill now rather than the numbered bill that was over in the, and I assume that there are copies of the DE3 over on the table if you don't have them already. Representative Hansen to the to the House File 906 as amended. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hackbar.
Mr. Chairman, I was under the assumption that we're going to take this bill up after session.
Well, that is correct.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's what I was told, and I had relayed that information to a number of other folks that are now no longer here because we're going to come back after session to hear this bill.
We have an hour and 5 minutes to move forward with this bill. And so that's a good point. I should have included that in the groundwork. We're going to start working through the testifiers. There have been even more sign up than had originally signed up. We've got the bill before us as amended. We are going to recess at 6 o'clock or thereabouts.
Well,
and then
Mr.
we are
Chairman,
going to come
our
back.
caucus has a caucus at 5:30.
Okay, we can recess at 5:30 before session. But we're going to get started on the bill, and then we're going to come back, and anyone else who wants to testify on the bill, or anybody that isn't listed and wants to testify on the bill, will be allowed to do that when we come back after session. It's supposed to be a short session, and that'll provide everyone an opportunity to participate in the debate.
Well, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I was under the assumption that we were coming back on this bill after session, and then I was also going to have a comment that not only is this committee meeting after session, also the Environment Committee is meeting after session, and there's people on this committee that are on that committee, etc. So there's some conflicts going on here, and I understand the predicament you're in, but I was told that we weren't coming back until after session on this bill. I just I'm a little dismayed by what's going on here.
Well, Representative Hackbarth, everyone will get an opportunity to testify for or against the bill, and all amendments that are being presented here tonight will be taken under consideration before we either pass or fail the bill out of this committee. And I did not anticipate, frankly, that we would be moving through the bills as quickly as we are. And in the interest of time, Representative Hackbarth, I have the Game and Fish bill as well, and the DNR technical bill up in another committee. So everyone is struggling right now with the. So we have the choice. We can take 30 minutes. We can take a brief listen to the bill from Representative Hansen. We can listen to the testifiers in the next 35 minutes, or we can just recess right now. That's not my choice. We're going to go ahead, get a brief test, and then once we hear the testifiers on the bill, we'll be able to have a robust discussion on the amendments and the bill as it gets done. So, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Just one moment, Representative Hansen. I did tell Representative Hackbarth that we were going to take the bill up after 6 o'clock. I did that, but I was not. I thought, frankly, that the Antler point thing would be a lot more than 4 or 5 testifiers and some other things as well. So, anyway, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. And I appreciate your explanation. I want to just kind of repeat that for members in the audience that we are now working off the DE3 amendment. The DE3 amendment is based on input that I have received from agencies and a wide variety of sources since the bill was introduced. And so it starts out with Section 1 with a number of definitions, defining local unit of government, defining mining, processing, and silica sand project, temporary storage, transporting. And then on page 2, it has standards and criteria. By October 1st, 2013, the Environmental Quality Board, in consultation with local units of government, shall develop model standards and criteria for mining, processing, and transporting of silica sand. These standards and criteria may be used by local units of government in developing local ordinances. Then we have a listing of standards and criteria all through page 2. On page 3, you have silica sand technical assistance team. By October 1st, 2013, the Environmental Quality Board shall assemble a silica sand technical assistance team to provide local units of government with assistance in ordinance development, zoning, environmental review and permitting, and other issues arising from silica sand mining and processing operations. I have modeled this off from the wetland technical evaluation panels. The technical assistance team shall be comprised of up to 7 members that can be chosen from the following agencies and entities. And the majority of the members must be from a state agency and have expertise in one or more following issues. I have added subdivision 4 that, frankly, I have taken from Representative Kelly's bill that was similar to my bill and has similar to the technical evaluation panels for wetland. The local government must consider the findings or recommendations in its approval or denial of the project, and then give reasons for the disagreement. The effective date is the following enactment. Rules, Section 2. I've received from the Pollution Control Agency copies of rules from the Wisconsin agencies that affect both reclamation and air quality. Minnesota does not have similar rules, so I'm directing the Pollution Control Agency to adopt rules to incorporate those relevant standards into Minnesota rules. And then Section 3 is an appropriation to make sure that this is funded. And that, Mr. Chair, is the bill.
Okay, we'll take brief questions if there are any for members, just if there are any top level. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hansen, could you just tell me kind of at a high level, what are the differences still between your bill now in its current form and Representative Kelly? Because this is the first time we've seen your new DE3.
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative McNamara, Representative Kelly's bill was essentially modeled on my bill, and the primary difference is that my bill has the Environmental Quality Board who will be involved, and Representative Kelly's bill sets up a new level of government to handle those processes.
Further questions? Okay, Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, under the rules, you said that we're going to incorporate some of the Wisconsin Administrative Code. As far as that goes, the Pollution Control Agency shall adopt the rules to incorporate Wisconsin Administrative Code pertaining to nonmetallic mining. Just how long have those rules been in effect in Wisconsin, and how effective have they been?
Representative Hansen.
Mr. Chair and Representative Uglum, I do not have that information in front of me. I can provide that when we come back after session.
Thank you. That'd be very interesting.
Okay, we're going to take the first testifier, Amanda Griggs, if you want to come forward. Ms. Griggs, introduce yourself, who you represent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Amanda Griggs. I am a resident of the most diverse ecosystem in the state, Houston County of the Driftless region. I have come before you today to express concerns relating to non-metallic mining of industrial silica sand and its adverse effects on the environment. At this time, Wisconsin is struggling to control this industry. Even with the DNR stretched thin, they have still found 80 to 90% non-compliance, including 2 significant runoff incidences of toxic water. These disasters to drinking water do not need to happen. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I respectfully urge your support for the EQB standards. The driftless region's cold water trout streams are a sign of ecological health. According to DNR plant ecologist Ann Pierce, who was sitting up here earlier, quote, "This ecoregion comprises 3% of Minnesota's land area, but provides habitat for 43% of the state's listed plant and animal species. Without strong state regulations, their habitats will be destroyed." The DNR has an extensive aggregate mapping program. What about the hydrological mapping? They are yet to be completed. How can we allow mining permits without understanding the hydrology of the area? And what about our air? There are no exposure standards for the known carcinogen silica dust. Our air will be filled with diesel exhaust, also a toxic element that causes autism in children that are born and unborn. These dangers must be fully understood before mining takes place in our communities. High-quality rivers and trout streams of the driftless region are recognized on state and national levels for their economic and environmental importance. The tourism industry generates $11.2 billion, including $694 million in sales tax, and accounts for close to 250,000 jobs. I believe we must protect this industry. My final point is the increasing concern of climate change. In 2007, the Minnesota legislature set goals to reduce our emissions 15% by 2015. Excessive diesel exhaust, change in land use, and exposure of our water is a setback. When do we draw the line? Do we continue to allow our precious ecosystems to be destroyed to support yet another system that shatters our national environment? I ask you all, please take a stand today. I thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for having a hearing today and hearing our testimony on this House file, and I thank the committee and Representative Hansen.
Okay, Ms. Griggs, Representative Yarusso, at the very least, has a question for you. Representative Yarusso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment on something for the record. I don't dispute the bulk of the testimony, but the statement about an element causing autism is incorrect. I believe the testifier is probably referring to mercury, and the papers that linked that with autism were falsified. They've been rejected from the original British medical journals in which they were published, and the author of them has been censored by his colleagues.
Thank you, Representative Russo. Any further questions of the testifier? Representative Uglum.
Yes, just one other question. You mentioned that there were no known standards for exposure to silica dust. Where did you get that information, ma'am?
Greg.
Mr. Chair. Representative, I have been studying this issue for over a year, and as far as there are standards for indoor industry, but as far as exposure into the open air, there are no standards at this point. And I've been studying this and calling the MPCA and all of our agencies and have not found a good answer on this.
Mr. Chair, but in fact, those standards for indoor exposure are based on parts per million in the air, and obviously inside they could be more concentrated and changed through air makeup systems and things like that. Where on outside it can still be measured at the point of at the point of the exposure and everything else. And OSHA, in fact, and I used to deal with this, OSHA, in fact, does control the exposure of silica and crystalline silica dust with workers in many, many industries. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Gregg.
Thank you. I do have to say that the levels at which they are measuring them at this time does not, I believe, adequately address silicosis and the damage that can be done by the size. It's the micron size that we need to look at and have stricter standards. So thank you.
Representative Isaacson?
Nope.
Okay. Someone here from the PCA that can address this specific question? Welcome, Mr. Thornton.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. My name is David Thornton. I'm Assistant Commissioner to the PCA. We have no standards that apply specifically to these kinds of facilities. We have no silica sand standards for ambient air quality conditions. We've asked the health department to develop a health-based value that we can use. It's short of a standard, but it's a formal process that they go through where they look at all the literature and make recommendations to us for safe levels in the air, and they're in the process of doing that. I'm not exactly sure what the time frame is for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that you may not, but OSHA does under the hazard communication standard and the crystalline silica standard, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Mr. Chairman, OSHA does have, as I understand it, exposure standards for people that work in industrial situations. I don't think it's just for indoors. I think it's just within factory environments. And I'm sorry, I don't know what that number is right now.
Correct. Mr. Chair, I don't know the exposure limits either, or the de minimis concentrations, but it is controlled and regulated under OSHA.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, my understanding, though, is the exposure rates you're concerned about here aren't the work site. You're concerned about the neighborhoods and the surrounding area, correct? So what you're saying is there aren't standards developed for a locale or a city or a surrounding area that is in the area of one of those mines, not specifically to the mine itself. So the general population standards is what we're really talking about here.
Ms. Gregg.
Mr. Chair, thank you. This industry is very large, and for example, there are a lot of transload facilities proposed and getting started in Winona County. Also, the potential for piles of sand to be at an open pit and blowing across the landscape, depending on the wind, the direction, the strength. And these dust particles you cannot see. So it's something that is not well tested, studied, or understood, and it is carcinogenic.
And so I want to just point out that while I'm sure that OSHA has standards for this sort of thing, it's in an occupational safety situation, whereas what she's referring to is a general situation like a home, a residence, an environment, a city, which is entirely different. Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if Commissioner Thornton could come back. Commissioner Thornton, I've just got a question. Do you have the ability to grant permits subject to evaluation, and if you were to come up with a standard in the future, would you be able to make those permits conditional on a standard yet to be determined?
Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chairman, I'm thinking. What we would probably do in a situation like that is reopen a permit and put new conditions in once a standard was in place.
McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Commissioner Thornton, so an industrial person or entity wanting to get a permit could agree with MPCA that the permit be subject to air monitoring, and that future air monitoring may subject them to some controls yet to be determined?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McNamara, that's correct.
Thank you.
Further questions for testifier Griggs? Oh, Representative Wagenius.
Thank you for Commissioner Thornton. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know in the area in which I live, in the metro area, there are air monitors that are permanent. And so we have a reasonable basis, not good enough in my judgment, but a basis for knowing what the base is. Do we have any kind of baseline monitoring in these areas which are have the potential to be mined for frac sand?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wigenius, actually, we don't. The last two permits that we've issued, we have put in monitoring requirements. And one of those facilities is the equipment is in place and they're beginning to collect the data now. And Wisconsin, some of the industry in the Eau Claire area has on their own put in some monitors, and some of that information is just coming in. So we really don't have a base of data out there yet. And that's one of the gaps here in this issue.
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Clark has a bill in, I understand, for a mobile unit to do some air quality monitoring. Would that kind of mobile unit be useful in getting some baseline air quality testing in these areas where there's potential for this mining?
Mr. Thornton.
Mr. Chair, Representative Wigenius, we've taken a good look at that bill, and our recommendation would not be to go with a mobile monitoring device. Our recommendation, if there's an interest in getting additional monitoring data, to put in fixed monitors. They can be moved after a period of time, but they give us an ability to compare completely the data that we're collecting to the rest of our monitoring network and what's being done around the country.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Wigenius.
Thank you. Well, if that is not your recommendation, and I thought, if I remember correctly, that was about $400,000, maybe way off. Can you, in a reasonable amount of time, do air quality monitoring so that there is a baseline in these areas that are under discussion?
Mr. Chair, Representative Wigenius, given the resources, we can do monitoring, or we can make it happen, whether it's our work that we do or requiring someone else to do it and monitoring what they do.
Representative Wigenius.
Well, let's talk about the resources then. What do you mean by that? I mean, you're talking about cash, I can tell, but what do you mean by that?
We're drifting very closely into the Environment Finance Committee, and that's where this bill will end up going. But go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wigenius. Well, it would not be just money. We would need probably at least part of an FTE. I believe it's going to be in the order of a few $100,000. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's less than $500,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Grigg. James McAlva. And then the next person will be Lynn Schoen. Welcome to the committee. State your name and address, or state your name and who you represent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Jim McElrath, and I'm a Florence Township Board Supervisor in Goodhue County and live in the city of Frontenac. A Florence Township Board has enacted a one-year moratorium last year to get our zoning ordinances and comprehensive plans in line and updated because of the new event of silica frac sand mining. We have nearly completed our work through our efforts, and we realize that we still need some state-level help. Our townships and counties are not up to, other townships and counties are not up to date with their ordinances. Some of them don't even have a comprehensive plan. And due to the immense size of the frac sand industry, Their activities cross state lines, city lines, towns, and townships. With our ordinances in line and theirs not in line, the immense traffic will flow through our town and townships, causing hazardous conditions for our residents. In Florence Township, we hit the pause button to deal with the frac sand mining issues and concerns, and we're asking the state to do the same and have a study conducted to establish statewide standards. And after the last testimony, it's pretty obvious to me that those really don't exist in any kind of solid fashion. The history and behavior of the frac sand mining companies have been devastating in western Wisconsin, and it's already happening in Winona and Wabasha, and we predict that it will go through southeastern Minnesota like a juggernaut unless we take call time out to study the issues. Without action, we'll wake up one morning and look in the mirror and say, what the hell happened? That's how fast they move. Whether you're Republicans or Democrats, we're all Minnesotans, and as a local government, we're asking the state to step up the plate because we need your help. Thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Lynn Shane. I'm a councilperson on Wabasha City. I represent the city for now. Our town consists of a lot of small businesses. Many of them are dependent on the tourism industry. Where we are located, it's at an interstate bridge and a two-lane highway, Highway 61, and then we've got the rail yard there. We keep hearing at testimonies about these great high-paying jobs that are supposed to be coming our direction, but when you look at where our hospital and clinic sits and the way that people have to come across the bridge to come use our dentists, our retailers, our everything else, we're looking, one of our concerns is that people aren't going to come to our town. Our town is only 2,500, but our drawing area is 10,000. When you clog up the bridge, you clog up the highway. With the number of trucks we're talking about high-paying jobs having to be laid off. We've got assistants, dental hygienists, nurses, doctors that are not going to have the patient base that they're going to need. In all of the testimony I've sat through for the last couple of weeks, there are still questions people can't answer, and that's what I'm here to just, if you can answer this at the end of everything is said and done, great. But right now, nobody's been able to provide answers. One is the acceptable particulate matter size and volume before the air does become an issue for silicosis. We don't have ambient air quality measurements. You just heard that. Second is how much silica sand can we lose from our aquifer before it starts really affecting our water levels. We're in a drought in southern Minnesota. A lot of the water is stored in the sand system. It acts as our filter. My question is, how much sand can you take and still guarantee our water supply? Thirdly, how much traffic can a neighborhood tolerate in terms of diesel emissions? This transload facility that I'm talking about that exists in Wabasha is situated right in the middle of the neighborhood, and we already, as a town, rank in the top 15% for the state for diesel emissions. We're in a river valley that makes this a especially critical issue for breathing concerns such as asthma. 4, who is going to monitor and then hold accountable the businesses that are non-compliant? We just heard that over in Wisconsin, DNR said in an article in the La Crosse paper that between 80 and 90% of the silica sand businesses are non-compliant. Many of those vendors are from Minnesota. Who's going to monitor them? Who's going to hold them compliant? We don't have a training program for our police departments. We don't have any direction in our small town about how do we hold them compliant and what is our recourse. We need more information on that. And 5, how many people will choose not to do business or vacations in Wabasha because they don't want to deal with the noise and traffic? And then how many small businesses will be collateral damage because of that decline? As I said, we are tourism-based. We have a lot of B&Bs, outdoor canoe rentals, lots of restaurants, that kind of thing. In Wabasha County alone, which is a very small county, we have 650 jobs just for tourism. And 6, how much revenue is the state prepared to lose because of loss of our property values? And the second question to that is, how do you plan to make up that lost income? Why would we like to see an extensive environmental study to address some of the above questions? Because no one has answers to these yet. There isn't a standard. There This is not a standard metallic mining business like the agri companies will come up here and tell you to believe. This is a non-metallic mining issue. Someone has to ultimately be responsible to monitor and enforce these businesses. We must have a state permitting process in addition to our local conditional use permits, so this is looked at in a comprehensive manner. It's going to take a statewide moratorium so we have enough time to establish this permitting process. The scope and magnitude of the silica sand mining and transport businesses demand that we get this right. Why are you in such a hurry? Let's slow it down. Thank you.
Any questions? Welcome to the committee. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Jody McElrath, and I think my name was on the same line as James McElrath, so I'm here to testify, hoping that I wasn't bypassed. I'm from Florence Township. I'm a planning commissioner, and I'm also the chair of Save the Bluffs, a citizens group. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I want to first thank Representative Hansen for introducing the bill. It's very important as a step in obtaining our much-needed help from the state for the silica frac sand mining. We must work together to strengthen this bill to accomplish the required controls on this potentially invasive and uncontrolled industry. I'd like to call your attention to a 4-page handout that I asked to be put into your packets today. It's full of facts. A lot of studies have already been completed. There's a lot of facts already on frac sand issues, and these would help to expedite the effort and timeline of the studies that we're asking for. We also need, in addition to that, some time out. Let's try not to allow new permitting on those mines that may be asking for permitting during this time where a study can be completed. And that way we can get our standards as we've been asking for, and local governments just don't have the resources to establish those standards. We need them at the state level. The sand companies will have many arguments against our requests. They argue that adequate standards and regulations are already in place. It's important to note that most of those standards and regulations were intended for construction sand, aggregate sand mining, processing, and transport. This is a very, very different business. The mining companies will also claim that the air quality standards are in place. As far as I know, the PM10 is about the smallest micron size that is being evaluated right now. It's the 2.5, 3 to 2.5 micron size that is the invisible threat. They'll also argue that they provide jobs. The fact is, most of their jobs required skilled mining workers, most of whom are imported. At best, some trucking jobs would be the economic outcome. I also remind you to look at the handout on the socioeconomic impacts. There are many facts and figures on tourism and so on in that handout. We can't trust our current standards to a whole new industry with significantly different type of operations. I want to remind you, as Lynn did, about the several accidents, the track record of the Wisconsin mines, and their several noncompliance issues. Let's put some teeth into this bill before frac sand mining bites us. Let's take a time out, get the studies done, and get the standards. I thank you.
Any questions? Thank you. And we're in recess. Be back about 20 minutes after session. Well, we're in recess now. Right?